WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisCI to 44321.
U.S. Representative Tom Tiffany of Minocqua is the Republican incumbent candidate for the 7th Congressional District. The election is November 5th. Congressman Tiffany, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Lisa, it's good to join you today.
Oh, thank you for participating in our candidate interview. I'll just start by asking you, why are you running for re-election? What is your campaign's key message?
We got a lot of work to do. Our country is headed in the wrong direction over the last few years. So I've been in office a little over 4 years, came in a special election, May of 2020, and the decision making has not been good in Washington, D.C. It's as simple as that. We need to secure our border. We need to rein in the ruinous spending that's leading to inflation, that's eating up people's paychecks. And we're seeing as we speak here what happens when you have weakness abroad. When you have a weak foreign policy, it leads to war. So those are, in terms of the big picture issues, those are the things that I'm really focused on.
What do you see as the country's most pressing challenge, and what specific challenge are you planning to take if you're reelected?
I think if you talk to most Americans, it appears that inflation, the high cost of living, is that number one issue. But I got to tell you, I think the number one issue before the American people is the border. I've been down there numerous times. I sit on the Judiciary Committee. We are the Committee of Jurisdiction. I've been down to the Darien Gap in Panama. I've seen how debilitating this has been for America. And we've basically given up our sovereignty. There's always been the expectation in America that people will assimilate into the American ideal. And that's not happening now. We are becoming the countries where these people are coming from: Haiti, Venezuela, Somalia. We need to get back to that assimilation. And the only way you can do it is to secure the border. And I helped write H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Bill. And I believe the best Secure the Border Bill that's ever been written by Congress. And so we have the policy prescription in order to do it. But it's also going to take a president who is willing to secure the border, unlike what President Biden and Vice President Harris have done.
How do you see the state of the economy, and what legislation or policy, if any, would you propose to incentivize economic growth, specifically in Wisconsin and in this congressional district?
I think in terms of the big picture issue on this, I think there's a couple things that are really important. One, we need to reinstate work requirements. If you go back and look at the advisory referendum that was on the ballot here in Wisconsin, 80% of Wisconsinites agree with that, and I think that's true across America. There's approximately 10 million people who are able-bodied that are not working in America. They need to work. The second thing is, and maybe the most important thing is, we have to get back to energy abundance and independence. When America has low energy prices, when we have reasonable energy prices, we prosper. And you think about it, diesel fuel moves the world. So if you want to bring down the price of groceries, you need to get control of energy prices. That's one of the main things we can do to get control of the high cost of living.
This is related. Inflation rates have stabilized, but they're still above pre-pandemic rates. What is the role of Congress in keeping the cost of goods and services low? Is it back to energy?
Number one, energy. Let's get back to energy independence. And sitting on the Natural Resources Committee, we've passed bills that will streamline the permitting process. What I hear from job creators out there is that, hey, we're fine with good, rigorous standards in terms of whether it's workplace standards, environmental standards, whatever. What we would like to see, though, is certainty. Because we'll live with the standards, because we're seeing projects that take 10, 15, 20 years in order to have the permitting project or the permitting process completed. time is money, and it's proving to be far too expensive to be able to get some of these projects done.
Are there certain areas of government spending that you would like to see reduced?
Yeah, I think some of the discretionary spending we can certainly reduce. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, you take a look at, in the previous session of Congress, a bill to to allocate another $87 billion to the IRS was authorized. I think it was approximately $80 billion. And there was no need to do that. Simplify the tax code. You don't need more IRS tax collectors that way. People are willing to pay their taxes, just don't make it so complicated. I mean, that's one small example. You take a look at over in Minnesota, the home of Governor Walz, who's now vice presidential candidate Walz. There's a major scandal feeding our future over there that came about during COVID, where they allocated $500 million to ostensibly feed children. Most of it has went out fraudulently. A woman was just arrested, I believe, taking $1.3 million. She's got a Tesla, a new home, and all the rest. That was both state of Minnesota and federal tax dollars that went into that. Those type of things, we need to be much better in Washington, D.C. about making sure those dollars do not go out fraudulently.
It has become increasingly expensive to raise a family. What policies do you support that make raising a family more affordable? For instance, do you support a child tax credit or other policies that reduce the cost of child care in any way?
So I think we should really use an all-of-the-above approach for families. I mean, families are not monolithic. And so often what happens with these federal programs, they have a very specified way in which you qualify for tax credits, those type of things. And I think we need to broaden that to allow people with their family situation for, if there's a tax credit or if we're going to offer help, that we fit it with the family situation, because there's not a one-size-fits-all approach that is going to work, because every family is different.
The cost of housing is another issue for Wisconsinites. What federal policies or legislation do you support that might lower the cost of housing, either for renters or home buyers?
Lower the cost of energy. You're going to lower the cost of goods and services being able to move about. We need to reform our regulatory processes. We make it more difficult for sawmills to be able to operate. We make it more difficult for us to get transportation projects done. There's a variety of ways in which we could reform the regulatory side of things that would really be helpful. There's an important Supreme Court decision that just came down in June called the Chevron decision. That could be helpful, especially if we in Congress are better about writing bills. Don't simply turn over the process to the regulatory agencies where they oftentimes load it up with additional requirements. Let's make it simplified. Let's make it more streamlined and allow those people that are the job creators out there, the people that are making things, allow it to be easier for them. The other thing in regards to housing, when you have over 10 million people come in illegally over the last 4 years, they're housed somewhere. Part of the reason for our housing shortage is we have put illegal aliens ahead of American people in terms of housing. That needs to be brought under control also.
You support deporting those individuals?
I certainly I support deportation, especially over the last 4 years. President Biden undid everything that President Trump had done to largely bring the border under control. And so many of those people that have come illegally, they came under, I believe, false pretenses. But also, look at, we've got 320,000 children that are in America that the Biden-Harris administration have no idea where they're at. These are underage children. They have no idea where they're at. There's 13,000 murderers in America in the last 4 years, 15,000 rapists that have come in. People that have broken the law in their home countries, and we've just let them in under the policies of the Biden-Harris administration. This has been a real problem. We need to have some deportations.
Social Security faces long-term financing shortfalls. What reforms to Social Security do you support to ensure future solvency?
Oh, I think we should make sure that Social Security continues into the future. And one thing that we can do is make sure that there are accurate COLA adjustments, the cost of living. We need to make sure that those are accurate. The other thing is we got to stop creating new programs. There's a few things that the federal government should be doing, and I think most people believe Social Security, Medicare, that those are critical programs for the American people. One of the ways in which we protect them is not creating all kinds of new programs, as has happened over the last 4.5 years. Why have we seen the inflation that's happening? It's because of excessive government spending, creating new programs. Let's make sure that the federal government does those things, those limited number of things, Social Security, Medicare, delivering the mail, things like that. Do those well. Don't try to do all kinds of other stuff. Because especially when they try to do much more, they really take away the freedom of the American people. For a lot of people in my district, they're like, and I think in Wisconsin, they're like, leave us alone at this point.
Do you support increasing the retirement age for Social Security?
I don't.
You don't. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures in Wisconsin?
Yeah, so first of all, do no harm. I mean, one of the things, like traveling to the southern border to Yuma, I saw an example where the uncompensated care was like $26 million as a result of illegal aliens coming in. If you look at, there was a refugee resettlement specifically to the hospital situation over in the Eau Claire area. There was a local public official in Eau Claire County that said, we can't take care of people's housing needs or their health care needs the way it is the people that are already here. Why are you bringing new people in? Also, the Biden administration has provided or proposed even stricter staffing standards on nursing homes, which I think the numbers I saw, about 3/4 of those nursing homes, they'd probably close if they have to live by the Biden-Harris recommendation for staffing in nursing homes. Let's first make sure we do no harm. Generally, in regards to health care, I believe in choice, competition, and transparency. We've really gotten a monolithic system since Obamacare came into being. It was supposed to reduce costs. Costs have went up by about 20%. I'm hearing from constituents and actually family members that wait times are getting longer and longer, what we were warned about. I don't have a problem with Obamacare staying in place, but we should offer people more choices because we are all individuals. Let's give them more choices and to be able to get the health care that is best for them.
Local communities in Wisconsin are faced with a growing number of issues. For example, issues related to water quality and PFAS, or a sudden influx of refugees like Wisconsin saw in 2021. How will you collaborate with local governments to ensure they have the necessary resources to address local issues?
One of the things that I've proposed is that local governments should have a say in whether these things happen. For example, the refugee resettlements. The federal government currently can do basically whatever they want to, even if the community can't handle it. To my previous answer, you have an official in Eau Claire County who said, we don't have sufficient housing for the people that live here the way it is. We have real health care concerns with the hospitals that have closed in the Chippewa Valley. And so let's make sure that we're not doing any harm to those communities. And they should have a say in whether those, for example, refugee resettlements happen. Now, in regards to PFAS, I have voted for legislation to allow more research in regards to PFAS because I think there's still a significant amount of research that has not been done. We don't know enough about it in terms of the policy prescriptions. I think that's one of the ways in which we help states and local communities is do that research at the federal level and share that with those local communities as far as what may be best practices. Because I think we're still finding our way in regards to especially the PFAS situation.
Are tax cuts or tax increases a focus of your campaign? And specifically, do you support extending and making permanent tax cuts from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017?
Yeah, we should make those permanent from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. I was not there and voted for that bill, but I do support what happened. And I support it for this reason, because it was broad-based tax cuts. So often people say, well, it's just tax cuts for the rich. That was not the case. It was very evenly spread out. And you actually saw in the latter part of the Trump administration that people on the in the lower economic strata were getting pay increases, were getting real increases in their income for the first time as a result of the policies they had put in place, including the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. So I think that's a good thing. I would vote to extend it because
extending it, they say, will add to the deficit and it costs an extra $3.8 trillion. Do you have a way to offset that lost revenue?
I think the offset, so they use a static model in Washington, D.C. that does not consider the real world. When you give people more money in their pocket, they will spend it, they will invest it, you will have more businesses created, more jobs created, and it actually has a positive effect. In fact, if you look at post-Tax Cut and Jobs Act, through the first couple years of the Biden administration, revenues were actually going up in Washington, D.C. We do not have a revenue problem in Washington. We have a spending problem.
That's not a real number in your mind, the $3 trillion.
Yeah, I think it's a static number, and you have to assess it over time. And we've actually seen more money come in post Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and I think you'd continue to see that. Because what's the alternative? And I believe Vice President Harris supports this, getting rid of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. It is going to be a major tax increase on American people.
Moving on to abortion, should there be a federal abortion policy passed by Congress, or should the issue be left solely up to the states?
It should be left to the states.
Left to the states. What should happen in Wisconsin?
Well, it's already happened in Wisconsin. We have a 20-week legislation that's in place, 5 months. I voted for that legislation when I was in the state Senate about 6-7 years ago, however long ago that was. And that was meant as a backstop in case Roe v. Wade went away, that there be a bill in place here in Wisconsin, and that is currently at 5 months. I think most people are looking for somewhere in the middle. There's people, obviously, on both sides that believe there should not be from conception on, others that believe it is up to 9 months. The thing that I found pretty unconscionable, though, in the last session of Congress, every Democrat member voted for unlimited abortions up to 9 months. I do not believe there should be abortions in the final trimester.
Energy. You've already talked a little bit about this. What's your position on climate change, and what congressional actions do you support that balance environmental and economic concerns with economic growth and job creation?
Oh, I believe it should be an all of the above approach in terms of energy. Let's produce all the energy we can, because when we have energy abundance, we have a prosperous America. All you got to do is go back and look. We get high prices. For example, for those of us of a certain age, we remember the Carter years in the late 70s, and energy prices increased significantly. Economic growth decelerated. It began to lag. You look in the ensuing time in the 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, early 2000s, as we had energy abundance, low prices, America prospered. And so we need to make sure we produce that. In regards to climate change, so some are asking us Americans to make serious sacrifices in the name of climate change. But how do we accomplish that when China and India are the #1 emitters around the world? I mean, I was at a conference once here in Wisconsin where the chief economist said 50% of the pollution, I don't know if this is accurate, 50% of the pollution coming to the West Coast, to like San Francisco, is coming from Asia. So if China and India don't rein in their emissions, then what purpose does it serve for America? And by the way, America has led the way. If you believe greenhouse gas emissions, if you believe CO2 is the cause of climate change, America is the world leader at this point in reducing CO2 emissions.
Do you support incentives for renewable energy development?
No, I think they should all be on a level playing field. I don't think that there should be incentives. They should
No priority for?
Yeah, they should all compete for the American consumer's dollar. I mean, for example, I introduced a bill in regards to wind and solar that said that you do not get the subsidies if you are covering productive farmland. We are seeing very productive farmland that is getting covered with wind and solar facilities. And I think production of food should be our number one goal. It's important to produce energy, but our number one should be to make sure that we're growing food. I think America, and specifically Wisconsin, which is losing thousands of acres of prime farmland at this point to wind and solar, which is very heavily subsidized by the federal government. In other words, you, the taxpayer. I think we should really reconsider that. So we should allow wind and solar, but it should not be as heavily subsidized as it is.
Should the U.S. continue to provide military support to Ukraine, and for how long and what form?
So we need I think it's a much broader question. Weakness leads to war. The very first act that President Biden took on January 20th of 2021 was to close Keystone pipeline and announce that we are no longer going to be energy independent in America. What happened to crude oil almost immediately? It went from $60 a barrel to $100 a barrel. Vladimir Putin was able to fund his war, that's their number one export, is gas and oil. He was able to fund that war by having more money come in to his treasury. Second of all, we had the Afghan debacle where President Biden bailed out of Afghanistan. We showed that we were going to be weak in the face of tyrants. We have to get back to a strong foreign policy. If we do that, then the tyrants of the world, like Vladimir Putin, will not take advantage of us. I mean, President Trump is the only president of the last four that Russia did not invade another country. We have to get back to a strong America, and then that will keep those tyrants at bay.
Should the United States support Ukraine to win that war?
I think at this point, I think we need to try to find a resolution to that conflict, and continuing to pour hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, I've been voting against it. Continuing to put hundreds of billions of dollars into that when we have such needs here at home, I just do not think is in the interest of the American people.
How should the U.S. be balancing support for Israel over concerns over civilian casualties in Gaza in the Israel-Hamas war?
Yeah, Israel has been, they were attacked viciously a year ago on October 7th, and I think that Israel has been justified in what they've done. Now, as we speak here, they've virtually ended Hamas and Hezbollah as these proxies that Iran has been propping up. And now Iran is even pumping missiles into Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself, and they should continue to do that. I think we should continue to aid Israel and provide them support because they are the sole democracy in the Middle East. By the way, go back 4 years ago. The Abraham Accords were being signed by Arabic countries with Israel. First time ever that you had seen peace treaties that were being signed. The Biden administration unleashed Iran by taking sanctions off, and Iran was able to access, about $100 billion. They didn't use it to benefit their people. They used much of it to buy armaments and to arm Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. And it very much destabilized the Middle East. Iran needs to be taken on, and we should put sanctions on them once again to make sure that they can't use that money to go after their neighbors. And I think you will see, if we had this strong foreign policy, including in the Middle East, and we defend Israel, I think you will see other Arabic countries that will come along and sign on the Abraham Accords also. They want peace in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia and other countries, they want peace in the Middle East. Iran is the destabilizing force. Why in the world the Biden-Harris administration allowed Iran another $100 billion to destabilize the Middle East is going to go down as a foreign policy debacle, almost like the evacuation of Vietnam.
I have two campaign spending questions for you. Are you troubled by the record-breaking amounts of out-of-state money being solicited by Wisconsin campaign operatives to influence our local election outcomes?
Yeah, you would prefer money that comes in locally. I mean, that's where I said, I get some money that comes in from out of state, but I primarily try to raise money from people that are not just in the state of Wisconsin, but in the district, and I think we should do that. I would urge people to evaluate candidates, and if they're getting 2/3 of their money from out of state, maybe that candidate isn't for Wisconsin so much as they're for the East and West Coast elites.
So look at the balance of where the funding is
Yeah,
coming
I think
from.
so. You know, because, I mean, it falls under the heading of free speech, and people should be able to share their views. I think it's just another component of what people should really be analyzing, because we have seen by Democrats in Wisconsin an enormous amount of money. I mean, give Ben Wickler, the head of the Democrat Party of Wisconsin, credit. He has raised incredible amounts of money from Hollywood, from the East and West Coast elites. But I think people should evaluate that. Do you want your candidates to be basically directed from the West Coast or by the Hollywood elites, or do you want Wisconsinites to be the voice of your representatives in Washington, D.C.?
A lot of money being spent is going to broadcast and stream negative attack ads, many of which walk that fine line in terms of accuracy versus exaggeration. At a time when the nation is so divided, how would you respond to a Wisconsin voter who asks you to stop using negative ads if you were using negative ads?
I always make sure that my ads have a component to it that is policy oriented. And so while I may criticize my opponent, and I think that is a place for advertising, I always try to put out that there is a solution also. So I try to make sure that there's a solution, that I'm identify the problem and then propose solutions to that problem.
Moving on to education, the number of Wisconsin school districts going to referendum asking local taxpayers for funding is increasing. Is there a need to, therefore, increase federal spending on K-12 public education?
No, we should not have the federal government dictating what's going on with education. I believe the Department of Education at the federal level should be abolished. Every state has a Department of Education. It is a state and local issue. The federal government just creates problems when they inject themselves into what is a state and local function of schooling.
Do you support federal student loan forgiveness?
I do not. I do not. So I have two daughters that our family chose to take out student loans. They did, and us as parents, we did also. We accepted that burden and that responsibility. We should pay it back, and so should others.
You've talked a lot about immigration and the border, and I want to give you a chance to summarize again. What would you focus on in an effort to fix what many feel is a broken immigration system?
So first of all, the Biden-Harris administration could change that today. They created the problem when they came into office. They could fix it now. But I would urge people to read H.R. 2. That's a bill that I helped author. It reinstitutes Remain in Mexico, resumes building the wall, provides for more border patrol, fix the broken parole system that has happened here on the watch of Secretary Mayorkas. There are really simple policy prescriptions that can be put in place to secure the border, and then let's have a sane legal immigration system where those coming in illegally are not leapfrogging those who are trying to do it the right way.
We're down to the last two questions. What's the biggest difference between you and your opponent?
You know, I don't know much about my opponent. This is the fourth of five opponents who are basically newcomers to the district, and so I really don't know much. The little bit that I see, it's basically the Harris campaign's what we want to do in terms of continuing to have open borders and things like that. So I really don't know much about my opponent. What I do is I talk to the people of the district about, here's the things that we need to do to fix our problems in America. They're not really complicated. It just takes the will to do it. Secure the border, get the high cost of living under control by spending within the taxpayers' means out in Washington, D.C., get back to energy independence, be a strong America in terms of strong foreign policy, and America will be much better off.
Final question. Given the steep national partisan divide, what's one issue you think has the potential to be resolved that would bring the parties together?
I've always believed that the border is that issue, but for some reason, I sit on Judiciary Committee. We're the committee of record in regards to the border. I've been very surprised that they're like, even in light of the fentanyl crisis, the incredible amount of human trafficking that's going on. I mean, 320,000 kids that are from foreign countries. We have no idea where they are in America. I thought the leadership of the Democrat Party in Washington, D.C. cared about those issues more. I've been so surprised that they have not been willing to go along and say, let's get this done. Let's secure the border.
Thank you, Congressman Tom Tiffany of Minocqua, the Republican incumbent candidate for the 7th Congressional District. The election is November 5th. Congressman Tiffany, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
It's always good to join you, Lisa.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.